Los Angeles, California. Summer of 1971. It is 11:15 at night, and the air inside that television studio feels like a piano wire about to snap. It smells of ozone, that metallic scent released by studio lights when they have been on for hours, mixed with hairspray and the stale trace of cigarettes the technicians smoke in secret. The cameras have just been turned off. The director shouted the final cut of the day, but no one moves from their place. There's a strange, almost unnatural stillness. There's no audience, no applause, just a team of exhausted men and a silence heavier than any noise. The rule agreed upon in the shadows is brutally simple. Whatever happens in the next 60 seconds does not exist for the press. There are no gloves, no referee, no warning bells. It is a liminal space where one man's reputation is about to be tested against the physical reality of another. This is the story that the major boxing promoters and Hollywood insurance companies tried to erase from the archives for decades. An encounter that should never have happened, born from a clash of egos in an ABC dressing room barely 3 days earlier. I have spent much of my life in rundown gyms, the kind where sweat sticks to the walls and success is measured by how many teeth you still have at the end of the week. I have seen world champions break into pieces in the solitude of a locker room, and I have seen how legends are manufactured with a single well-placed lie. My job has never been to feed the myth, but to filter the truth through all the noise. I am an old-school chronicler, someone who prefers a whispered testimony in a San Francisco bar to an official press release. And what I am about to tell you is what happens when heavyweight arrogance collides with the precision of a man who viewed combat as an exact science. It all began with a sarcastic remark, a sin of arrogance committed in the hallways of a national network. Bruce Lee was there promoting his vision of combat, talking about fluidity and intercepting the opponent's punch. In the same building, a boxing champion, a titan of muscles and metals, a man who made his living turning out other people's lights with a single blow, watched him with absolute contempt. To the boxer, what Bruce did was a little dance, an elegant choreography for the cameras, but useless against the sweet science of the professional knockout. That Chinese guy wouldn't even take the air from one of my jabs, the champion said as he walked past Bruce's dressing room. It was a dry mockery, thrown with the confidence of someone who knows himself invincible because of his size. Bruce did not flinch. There were no shouts or threats. None of that cheap theater we see today at press conferences. Bruce simply smiled, a cold smile, the kind that tells you the man already knows something you have not yet discovered. Instead of answering the insult, he proposed a proof of concept, a private encounter to show that his system was not theory, but pure physics applied to human pain. The atmosphere in the following days was electrically tense. Rumors ran through the ABC hallways like wildfire. The executive producers were terrified. They had million-dollar contracts tied to the image of that boxer. And on the other side, they had a rising star who was revolutionizing television. If anything went wrong, if either of them ended up seriously injured, the careers of everyone involved would go down the drain. But curiosity is a contagious disease, and the desire to see who was right overcame corporate fear. The chosen stage was a private network gym, a facility locked tight after midnight. The tribunal was made up of a very small group, an executive producer who could not stop wiping sweat from his forehead, 2 cameramen forbidden to turn on their machines unless they received a signal, and an old-school trainer, a man named Miller, whose face was hardened by 1,000 battles and who knew perfectly well that something was about to go very wrong. Miller was the official skeptic. For him, boxing was the only truth. Reach weight mass. If a man weighing 100 kilos hits one weighing 60, the 60-kilo man falls. That was his entire universe. He looked at Bruce with a mix of pity and annoyance, convinced that that night the actor would end up with a shattered jaw. What Miller did not understand was that Bruce was not playing the same sport. At 12:30 in the morning, the boxer entered the gym. He dominated the space with his mere presence. He threw a couple of shadow punches into the air that sounded like whips slicing through the wind. Each imaginary impact echoed off the empty walls, reminding everyone present that a single miscalculation meant a guaranteed trip to the hospital. The champion was relaxed, almost bored, throwing crude jokes at his trainer. For him, it was a formality, a way to shut up the little actor before going to bed. Then Bruce entered. He moved with an economy of motion that was unsettling. He wore no protective gear, no gloves, only his light training clothes. He stopped in the center of the gym, and the air seemed to drop a couple of degrees. His calm was not passive. It was the calm of a predator who has already studied every weakness of his prey. He did not throw noisy shadow punches, did not try to intimidate with size. He just stood there, breathing rhythmically, observing the giant in front of him as if he were a mathematical problem that needed solving. The producer stepped forward and repeated the rules they had agreed on. One chance only. The boxer would throw his best punch with full intent to connect. Bruce had to intercept or deflect that punch using his Jeet Kune Do system, without stopping the action if things got ugly. The distance was fixed, a distance where the boxer had the theoretical advantage of his long reach. It was a setup designed to favor the Titan, so there would be no excuses about lack of space or quick movements. Miller stepped forward and looked Bruce in the eyes. "Are you sure about this, kid? My man doesn't know how to hold back. If he hits you, he's going to break something," he said in a voice that tried to sound paternal but was full of arrogance. Bruce did not even look at him. He kept his eyes fixed on the boxer's chest. "Force is nothing if it doesn't reach its destination," Bruce replied in a voice so soft it almost vanished in the echo of the gym. At that moment, the tension reached its peak. The two men stood face to face. The difference in size was ridiculous. The boxer looked like a mountain of muscle. His shoulders were twice as wide as Bruce's. The champion settled into his classic guard, clenching his right fist with such force that his knuckles turned white. He was ready to finish this in one trip. He wanted to humiliate Bruce, to prove that all that Eastern mysticism had no place in a real ring. For a second, no one dared to breathe. The producer raised his hand to give the signal. The silence in the room was louder than any shout. You could hear the buzz of a fly trapped in one of the overhead lamps. The boxer adjusted his feet, digging the tips of his shoes into the canvas, loading all the energy from his legs into his hips, preparing to throw a right hand forged by months of training and years of accumulated frustration. Bruce, by contrast, looked almost relaxed. His hands were not in a tight guard, but open, floating in the space in front of him as if feeling the air currents. There was no tension in his shoulders, no fear in his eyes. He was in that empty state, where time seems to stretch. The detail no one noticed at that moment, except perhaps Miller, who began to frown, was that Bruce was not looking at the boxer's fists. He was looking at the giant center of gravity. Then the producer dropped his hand. It was a quick movement, almost a spasm. The boxer did not wait a millisecond. He threw the punch. It was not a probing jab. It was a real attack, a projectile of flesh and bone aimed straight at Bruce's face. The sound of air being displaced by the champion's fist was like a dull roar. Time stopped for the witnesses. Everyone expected to see Bruce's head snap back, expected the dry crack of bone breaking against concrete. But what happened next defied all traditional sporting logic. At the precise instant when the boxer's punch reached its point of maximum acceleration, before it could generate its full impact force, Bruce moved. He did not step back. He did not flee. He entered the opponent's space. It was a movement so small and so precise that some of those present could not even process it in real time. What few knew was that Bruce was not fighting the boxer. He was fighting the boxer's physics. He had calculated the trajectory angle and the exact moment when the giant's arm would fully extend. Just as the fist was centimeters from his face, Bruce placed his open palm directly on the champion's biceps. It was not a hard strike. It was specific pressure on a nerve point, a calculated push that used the boxer's own inertia to cancel the attack. The giant's arm froze in midair. The sound of Bruce's palm hitting the champion's muscle echoed like a gunshot in the empty room. The boxer, confused, tried to force the punch, but his arm simply did not respond. His power had evaporated. He stood there with his arm extended and the expression of someone who has just tried to run through a brick wall and realized the wall is not there. The silence that followed was sepulchral. The boxer stared at his own arm in disbelief, searching for the strength that had always been there and that, in that second, had completely abandoned him. From the corner, Miller opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What they had just witnessed was not in his boxing manuals. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was only the beginning of the chaos that was about to be unleashed in that room. Miller, the old-school trainer, was the first to break the spell. He cleared his throat, spat into a handkerchief, and let out a dry laugh devoid of humor. "That was a trick, kid," he shouted as he walked along the edge of the canvas. "A magic trick for the cameras. My fighter stopped because he didn't expect you to put your hand on him like you were giving him a blessing. In a real fight, that arm doesn't stay there. In a real fight, he would have run you over." The boxer, who was still staring at his biceps as if trying to understand why the muscle throbbed in a way it never had before, straightened up. The confusion on his face quickly turned into something far more dangerous: humiliation. A man crowned as one of the strongest in the world does not accept that a 60-kilo guy can stop his arm with an open palm. His ego, fed by years of knockout victories and magazine covers, had just taken a deep cut. "He's right," the champion said in a voice that no longer carried a trace of the earlier mockery. Now it was a fighting voice. "Let's do it again. But this time I won't stop to see what you do. This time I'm going to go through you." The air in the gym grew thick, almost unbreathable. The executive producer, a man who lived by ratings and numbers, took a step back into the safety of the shadows. He knew that what was about to happen was no longer a proof of concept. It had become personal. And in this business, when things become personal, someone ends up on the floor, and someone else ends up with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. But no one stopped the action. The morbid desire to see the fall of a giant or the miracle of a modern David was too strong. Bruce Lee did not change his stance, did not tense up, did not start bouncing like a traditional boxer. He simply adjusted his lead foot a few millimeters. His gaze remained fixed on the champion's solar plexus, ignoring the feints the giant began to make with his shoulders. Bruce knew the first attack had been a warning, a demonstration of control, but he also knew the second attack would be an attempt at execution. "When you're ready," Bruce said. It was an invitation to disaster. The boxer charged. This time there was not a single clean punch. It was a barrage. The champion threw a left jab to measure distance, immediately followed by a cross, right meant to tear through anything in its path. He moved with the surprising speed that only elite heavyweights possess, 100 kilos of mass moving like a gale. What happened in the next 3 seconds is what witnesses have whispered about for decades, changing details out of fear of sounding insane. Bruce did not slip to the sides. He did not do the bob and weave movement Miller expected. Instead, Bruce seemed to vanish and reappear inside the boxer's guard. It was a perfect geometric infiltration. As the champion's right hand brushed past Bruce's shoulder, the little dragon was already at the center of the storm. There was no wide arc to his punch, no visible backward motion of his arm to build momentum. Bruce simply closed his fist an inch away from the giant's chest. It was an explosion. It was not a boxing punch. It was a transfer of kinetic energy that seemed to rise from the floor, pass through his hips, and detonate in his knuckles. The sound was not the crack of bone, but a deep, dull thud, like someone striking a sandbag with an iron sledgehammer. The boxer's body jerked unnaturally. His feet, firmly planted seconds earlier, lost contact with the ground for a fraction of a second. The giant did not fall backward, he folded inward. It was as if his soul had been sucked out through his sternum. His knees buckled, and he ended up sitting on the canvas, eyes wide open, searching for oxygen. His lungs, collapsed by the impact, refused to process. There were no screams, only the agonized sound of a man trying to catch his breath. The silence that followed was absolute. Miller stood frozen, the towel hanging from his hand. The executive producer covered his mouth, realizing he had just witnessed something that, if made public, would destroy the mystique of professional boxing forever. Bruce, for his part, took a step back and returned to his resting position. His breathing was as calm as if he had just finished a walk in the park. There was no celebration, no boasting, only the cold satisfaction of a scientist who has just proven a physical law. "Mass is an illusion," Bruce finally said, looking at the champion still on the floor, pale and trembling. "If you cannot control time and space, your weight is just a burden I use against you." Miller ran to his fighter. Get up, he shouted, but the boxer could not. It was not just physical pain. It was psychological shock. He had been hit by something he did not understand. A man he considered an actor had dismantled him in less than a blink, without even breaking a sweat. The champion looked at Bruce with a mix of terror and respect bordering on the religious. In that moment, in that dark Los Angeles gym, boxing ceased to be the top of the food chain for those present. Then the corporate panic set in. The executive producer approached Bruce, almost begging, "This can't get out. If word spreads that the champion was humiliated by a martial arts actor, we'll lose millions. Sponsors will pull out. Las Vegas fights will be canceled. Bruce, you have to promise me this stays in this room." Bruce looked at him with the detachment that characterized him. He did not need the fame of having beaten a boxer. He already had the only validation that mattered to him, that of his own system. "I'm not here to sell tickets," Bruce replied as he picked up his jacket. "I'm here to find the truth in combat." And the truth had already been spoken that night. In the early hours of the morning, everyone present entered into a tacit pact of silence. The camera tapes, if any had recorded something, disappeared into the network vaults and were never seen again. It is said the boxer was never the same. His confidence had been shattered, and his subsequent fights lacked the blind aggression that had made him feared. Miller, for his part, retired from professional training shortly afterward, dedicating himself to studying texts on anatomy and Eastern biomechanics that no one expected to see on his desk. Over the years, the few witnesses gave contradictory versions. Some said it was a punch to the chin. Others swore Bruce never touched him and that the boxer fainted from fear. Those contradictions were created deliberately to protect jobs and television contracts. The fog of uncertainty spread over that night, feeding the legend and allowing the world of boxing to keep turning as if nothing had happened. But the detail no one tells, the one I heard years later from one of the cameramen in a San Francisco bar, is what happened just before Bruce left the gym. The boxer, recovered but still leaning on the ropes, asked him, "How did you do it? I didn't see the punch." Bruce stopped at the door, turned around, and said, "You don't have to see it. You have to feel it. The problem is you spent your whole life training to hit a wall when you should have been training to be the water that passes through it." The story of that night in 1971 is a reminder that brute force is just noise when it faces absolute precision. Bruce Lee did not go to the gym that night to humiliate a man, but to prove that size is a mental construct when time and geometry are mastered. The champion took the secret to his grave, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of a respect he could not explain with words. Bruce took something far more valuable, the unshakable certainty that his art was not cinema, but a reality capable of bending the greatest titans of the modern world. In the end, the world may continue debating whether martial arts work against boxing, whether weight is the decisive factor, or whether it was all a Hollywood myth. But for the 5 men who were in that ABC studio at 1 a.m, the debate ended forever. They saw a mountain fall and understood that in the hands of the right man, an inch of distance is more than enough to change history. The air in Los Angeles returned to normal at dawn, but for those who were there, the world no longer felt the same. They had seen the invisible. They had seen how the science of the spirit defeated the science of flesh. And that is a truth that no television network, no matter how powerful, will ever be able to erase from the archives of reality. The myth was born that night, not because of what was said, but because of the silence that followed the blow. A silence that still echoes for anyone who dares to doubt the power of the mind over matter. Yeah,